Okay, let's talk about that feeling. You know the one. It's late. Maybe you're lying in bed scrolling when you absolutely should be, sleeping.
Definitely been there.
Or maybe you've just finished cleaning at like 2 a.m. and you collapse on the couch. Or you're just generally feeling a little disconnected, watching life happen on your screen.
Yeah, that NPC feeling sometimes.
Exactly. And then you see a video, just one short video, and then another, and then another.
And down the rabbit hole you go.
Before you know it, you're deep in the feed, and something strange starts to happen.
That's it. That's when you suddenly find yourself thinking, wait, do I actually need that specific, like, oversized pastel-colored water bottle I keep seeing everywhere?
Right. Or why am I suddenly craving a limited edition cookie from a place I've never even been to?
Or, and this is where it gets really weird sometimes, is this slightly unsettling kind of cursed-looking doll named Labubu. Is she speaking to me? Do I need her in my life?
Totally. It's that weird, sudden obsession with things TikTok just seems to be collectively craving, even when that little voice in your head is kind of whispering, this is probably overrated,
Or maybe shouting, do I genuinely even want this? Or is the internet just telling me I do?
It's confusing.
It is confusing, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's also a really, really modern and widespread experience, right? And the source material we've been diving into, it tackles this head on. It makes the case that there are some incredibly powerful psychological and neurological forces at play.
Behind why we get hooked on these specific, often really bizarre viral cravings.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've got this central text, why TikTok makes you crave stuff, and it really tries to pull apart the threads of this chaos. It uses these perfect examples, like the absolute phenomenon of people rushing out to get crumble cookies when a new flavor drops.
Oh, yeah.
Behaving, as the source puts it, like it's Black Friday 2007. Freaking out.
Flying out of their homes for a cookie. Even though, and this is key, the actual reviews of the cookies are often, let's be charitable, mixed.
Mixed is putting it mildly sometimes. The source notes people are literally calling them mid.
Meaning just, okay, right, nothing special, yet the collective online energy around them creates this, like, intense desire.
It's wild.
And then, of course, there's the Labubu doll.
Ah, yes.
Which the source describes as having zero practical use and not even cute in the traditional way, looking like it eats souls.
Which is quite the description.
It really is. And yet somehow she became this must-have cultural artifact for a certain corner of the internet.
It's just amazing how things like that can just happen. It feels so random sometimes.
It does feel random from the outside.
So our mission in this deep dive really is to take these examples and the insights from the source material and really unpack the core reasons and mechanisms behind it all.
Yeah, let's try and figure it out.
We want to understand why your brain reacts this way, what's actually happening beneath the surface of these trends, and maybe, most importantly, what that means for you and your own desires, your own decisions.
So if you've ever felt that inexplicable pull towards something bizarre or unexpected just because everyone online seems to have it or want it,
this is for you.
This is definitely for you. Let's really dig into this, maybe starting with a claim the source makes that, honestly, it sounds a little dramatic at first pass.
Oh, yeah, it gets right to it. No messing around. The source says right out of the gate that TikTok has literally changed how dopamine works in our brains.
Literally changed. It sounds intense, doesn't it?
It really does. Is it rewiring our physical brains was my first thought? Like brain surgery via scrolling?
Yeah, it sounds like that. But the source clarifies it's not necessarily a physical, structural change like, from traumatic brain injury or something. Instead, it refers more to a significant conditioning, an alteration in how our dopamine system functions. Specifically, how it responds to stimuli and drives our behavior based on the patterns of how we interact with the platform.
So it's more about modifying the pathways. The response is related to reward and anticipation.
Exactly. It's conditioning those pathways.
Okay. That distinction feels important. So how does TikTok actually do this kind of conditioning? What's the specific mechanic at play in that endless scroll?
Well, the source points directly to the fundamental design. It's the incredibly fast-paced, short-form video format combined with unpredictable rewards.
Unpredictable rewards, like a slot machine.
Kind of, yeah. When you're swiping through video after video, you're getting this constant rapid-fire stream of stimuli. Each swipe is like a little lottery ticket.
You never know what's coming next.
You never know.
Yeah.
Is the next one going to be something hilarious, something shocking, something deeply relatable? or just something that makes you go, what was that?
It's a constant element of surprise and novelty.
Precisely. And because you get something with every swipe, even if it's just a brief flicker of attention or curiosity or maybe mild amusement, it creates this incredibly potent cycle. Anticipation, then immediate, albeit small, gratification.
And that trains the brain.
It trains your brain's dopamine system in a very particular way. Dopamine, it isn't just about pleasure, right? It's powerfully involved in motivation, in seeking behavior, and how we learn through reward prediction.
So the brain is learning to prioritize the act of seeking, the scrolling itself.
Exactly right. And the source highlights a really counterintuitive consequence of this specific type of conditioning. It points to studies suggesting that the brain actually gets more hyped about the anticipation of getting something than actually having it.
Okay, wait. Let's pause on that. The anticipation is more rewarding than the actual experience.
That's what the source suggests, yeah.
That feels backward, like totally backward from how we normally think about wanting things. Usually the goal is to get the thing, isn't it?
Traditionally, yes. Evolutionarily speaking, our reward pathways are strongly activated by consumption. Eating a meal when you're hungry, finding shelter, social connection.
Yeah.
The pleasure is in the outcome, the having, the consuming.
Right.
But the source argues that this constant, unpredictable, low-effort stream of potential rewards on platforms like TikTok, it shifts this dynamic. The process of seeking the continuous swiping, looking for the next interesting thing, that hope that the next video or product reveal will deliver that big hit of novelty or satisfaction.
That becomes the main thing.
And that becomes the primary conditioned behavior. The seeking itself is what gets reinforced over and over again.
Wow. So that intense feeling of wanting something you see go viral, it's not necessarily a deep, intrinsic desire for that specific item, not really about the crumble cookie itself.
According to the source, often no. Not primarily. And this leads to maybe the most critical insight in this whole section. So you're not addicted to the thing. You're addicted to the scrolling, the search, the hope that this next product is going to fix everything.
The search. The hope. Wow. Okay. That totally reframes that feeling, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's not about the physical object itself, but about the feeling tied to the platform, the process of discovery within the scroll, and that sort of temporary promise that maybe, just maybe, acquiring this trendy item might deliver that elusive sense of satisfaction or completeness that the endless search always seems to hint at.
That's it, exactly. The physical product becomes almost like a token, a temporary goalpost in this continuous cycle of engaging with the feed. The source suggests that the real reward mechanism is tied to the act of scrolling and participating in the trends that pop up there.
Which is maybe why, as the source implies, you might buy the item, maybe use it once or twice.
Or just take a picture of it.
Right, and then the intense desire just fades. And you're on to the next trend, maybe still feeling a bit empty.
Because the true consumption wasn't really of the object. It was of the trend and the anticipation it generated on the platform.
That makes an uncomfortable amount of sense, especially when you think about how fast trends rise and fall. The object serves its purpose the moment it's acquired, or maybe just shown off online. And then its value, which was really tied to that fleeting online moment, it just kind of evaporates.
It's a powerful psychological loop. And platforms like TikTok, just by their very design, seem to amplify it. But, this intense, conditioned pursuit of anticipation isn't the only factor at play here.
Okay.
The source points to another really fundamental human drive that these TikTok trends tap into.
Okay, so beyond the brain's reaction to the scroll, that dopamine hit, what else is pulling us towards these trends? What else is going on?
This is where the source brings in the psychological layer of belonging and mimicry.
Mimicry, like copying.
Yeah, but it talks about mimicry not just as simple imitation, but as something deeply ingrained in our survival brain.
Survival brain, you mean like way back, caveman times?
Exactly, that kind of time frame. Psychologists and evolutionary biologists, they suggest that for our ancestors, watching and copying what others in the group did was just a fundamental survival strategy.
Makes sense. Safety in numbers.
Totally. If the tribe started doing something, eating a new plant, running from a certain sound, moving camp, copying them, was often the safest, most efficient path to survival. You benefited from the group's knowledge, you stayed accepted, you avoided dangers they knew about.
Okay, I get the ancient survival part, but how does that primal wiring show up today? On TikTok, of all places.
Well, the source argues that online trends become these modern proxies for those ancient tribal behaviors. Participating in a trend isn't just about liking a product or a dance, It's a signal. a signal of group affiliation.
So it shows you understand the current cultural landscape of the platform, that you're in the loop, part of the collective conversation.
Precisely. You belong.
Okay, so it's that feeling captured in those lines from the source. If the tribe likes the cookie, you eat the cookie. If the tribe has the pink Stanley cup, you better drink water like it's a flex.
Those lines really do hit it on the head, don't they?
They really do.
Let's look at the crumble cookie thing again, but through this lens. The source describes people flying out of their homes to get these cookies when new viral flavors drop.
Standing in line, spending maybe quite a bit of money.
Right. For cookies that, again, the source points out, are often described as mixed or even just mid.
That's the irrational part, isn't it, from a purely taste perspective? If they were truly, like, the best cookies ever made, okay, maybe the rush makes a bit more sense.
But the source highlights this contradiction specifically to point out the real driver. It's not just about the cookie itself.
It's the mimicry instinct.
The underlying motivation, connected right back to that ancient mimicry instinct, is your brain basically telling you, hey, if I participate in this, if I eat this cookie, I belong. I get it. I'm part of the current wave.
So the desire for social inclusion, for feeling connected to the group, it just overrides the actual quality of the object or the effort involved.
It seems to, yeah, absolutely. That feeling of being in the loop online, it provides validation,
Right.
sense of relevance, connection in a digital space that can otherwise feel pretty isolating or just overwhelming.
And sharing the experience, trying the cookie, posting about it, getting the memes.
Those become these low-stakes ways to reinforce your belonging to this, like, digitally defined group or community. It taps right into that deep-seated human need to be part of something larger than ourselves.
It really makes you wonder about the pressure to conform online, doesn't it? Even if you see yourself as a total individual offline, there's this magnetic pull sometimes to perform fitting in when you're online.
There is, and it's amplified massively by the sheer visibility of these trends. You see thousands, maybe millions of people doing it, and that reinforces the perception that this is what the group is doing right now.
Okay, so we've got the brain conditioned to chase the scroll's anticipation, that dopamine loop, and we've got this ancient survival instinct pushing us to mimic the tribe, to belong. But what about the items that are just plain weird? The ones that don't seem conventionally appealing at all, but they still go viral, like Labubu.
Yeah, that brings us to another powerful driver, the allure of novelty. And the idea the source puts forward that in the doom scroll jungle, that overwhelming constant stream of content,
Yeah.
weird stands out. Our brains are constantly scanning for novelty. It's a way to prioritize attention. When everything starts to look and feel the same, the genuinely strange, the unexpected, this slightly jarring thing that grabs our focus immediately.
And that's where the Labubu doll enters the picture.
Perfectly.
The perfect, bizarre embodiment of this exact principle. The source describes her in such vivid detail. Cursed looking, a girl boss, looking like she eats souls.
Objectively.
Objectively, as the source states flat out, she has zero practical use. And she's not even cute in the traditional way. By any standard metric, she should not be a desirable object.
Right. If you just saw her sitting on a shelf in a shop, you might actually back away slowly. Exactly. But the source explains why she went viral. It was precisely because she was chaotic, because she was breaking the mold.
So, in a feed full of algorithmically optimized, often very similar looking content.
Labubu was jarringly different. She was novel.
Maybe novel in a way that felt authentic
Wow.
to the chaos of the internet itself.
Perhaps. Yeah, she wasn't polished or conventionally appealing. She was unapologetically strange. And the craving she generated wasn't really for a functional object, but for that novelty itself, for that differentiation. The source notes people buying her for the bit.
Okay, what does that phrase really mean in this context, though? Buying something for the bit.
It basically signifies a purchase made primarily for the humor.
Right.
You know, the irony, the content it enables, or the performance it allows online, rather than for genuine personal use or enjoyment of the object itself.
So it's buying something because it's funny to an audience.
Or because owning it lets you participate in a specific ironic online conversation. It's not really serious consumption. It's more like performance consumption.
And the source definitely doesn't see Labubu as just a toy.
Oh, not at all. It explicitly calls her a badge. It says not a toy. She's a badge. A sign you're ironic, on trend, weird in the right way.
A badge you wear online to signal something specific about your identity.
Precisely. In this digital age, where our identity is often so carefully curated and broadcast, the objects we acquire and display online, become these powerful symbols.
So owning Labubu isn't about having a doll to cuddle.
Definitely not.
It's about communicating that you understand and appreciate a certain niche of internet culture, that you're part of the group that celebrates the absurd, the chaotic, the unconventional.
It's a way of differentiating yourself while also signaling belonging to that weird in the right way tribe, as the source puts it.
So buying a cursed doll is actually, in a weird way, a rational act if you see it as acquiring a social signal or an identity marker within a specific online context.
It can be, yeah. Its value isn't intrinsic to the object, but in what owning it says about you to others online.
That's a fascinating shift in how we assign value, isn't it?
It really is. The value gets tied to the symbolic representation, the cultural currency it holds within a specific digital space, rather than its traditional function or aesthetic appeal. And this whole dynamic, where objects become badges or props, it's deeply intertwined with how platforms and creators leverage classic consumer psychology.
Okay, right. So it's not just these sort of deep psychological forces operating in a vacuum. The platform itself and the way trends are marketed on it, they're actively playing on these wires in our brains. They know what they're doing.
Oh, absolutely. The source explains that these well-established consumer psychology tactics, they get amplified on platforms like TikTok because of the speed, the reach, the social dynamics.
Like the scarcity effect, that feeling of, oh no, it's selling out.
A perfect example. In traditional marketing, right, making something seem rare or limited edition drives up demand. Our brains perceive scarcity as increased desirability.
Standard stuff.
Standard stuff. But on TikTok, trends explode so quickly that items genuinely do become scarce almost instantly. That viral video showcasing something amazing can literally lead to it selling out nationwide within hours.
You see it happen all the time.
All the time. This rapid, visible depletion creates this intense sense of urgency and panic, like if you hesitate, you will miss out entirely. It just supercharges that scarcity response.
Okay. And then there's social proof. Seeing everyone else do something makes you feel like maybe you should too.
Massively amplified on TikTok. Hugely. You see thousands, sometimes millions, of people using the same product, doing the same dance, reacting to the same thing. This sheer volume of apparent endorsement creates incredibly powerful social proof.
Your brain just goes, well, if that many people are into it.
There must be something real there.
Exactly.
The source points out that this is why things like, well, like a doll that looks like it eats souls can gain traction. The sheer volume of people talking about it creates this weight of social proof that can override your initial rational judgment that it's objectively weird or useless.
It's like the collective opinion of the crowd just becomes the dominant factor, drowning out your own individual skepticism.
Exactly. It leverages our inherent tendency to look to others for cues, especially when we're feeling overwhelmed by information. If everyone's doing it, it feels like the right thing to do, or at least the relevant thing to pay attention to.
And the last big tactic, FOMO, marketing the fear of missing out.
FOMO. The source describes how TikTok trends create this pervasive sense that there's a party happening right now, and you'll be on the outside looking in if you don't participate.
Like a digital party.
Exactly. The viral moment, the trend, it feels like this temporary, exciting event that everyone who's cool or relevant is part of. Acquiring the trendy item is presented as your ticket to this party.
You see people having fun, connecting over this shared experience.
And the thought of not being part of that, it triggers that anxiety of missing out on a social connection or just a cultural moment. But the source beautifully contrasts this feeling with the often mundane reality of, for example, the cookie party.
Which it calls a party that's literally just a sugar bomb in a box.
Such a perfect encapsulation, right?
Yeah.
The feeling is social and exciting. The reality is often solitary and, well, just eating a cookie.
It really highlights how effectively these platforms can package consumerism as a social experience, leveraging our deep-seated anxieties about exclusion and our desire to be part of the group.
Definitely.
Okay, so pulling this all together, the conditioned dopamine response chasing anticipation, the ancient mimicry drive for belonging, the brain-seeking novelty in the chaos, and these turbocharged marketing tactics, it all seems to point back to that central thesis the source really wants us to grasp.
Which is that fundamental realization that most of us don't even want the thing. We want what it represents.
We want what it represents. So, okay, going back to the examples one last time, the crumble cookie isn't just a cookie. The source says flat out, crumble's not a cookie, it's content.
Think about the typical journey, right? The typical life cycle of a crumble cookie that you see on TikTok. The source breaks it down perfectly. You film it, you review it, you eat it once, you don't even finish it.
That is a very specific and very common behavior pattern you see in those videos. People just take one bite, give their verdict, and then often set it aside.
And the source explains why this happens. Because the experience is over the moment it's posted.
Wow.
The primary value, the main motivation, it wasn't rooted in the actual culinary experience of eating the cookie. The value was in the act of participating in the trend, creating content around it, joining the viral conversation online.
The physical cookie was simply a prop for this digital performance.
The value was extracted the moment the video went up or the picture was posted, not when the cookie was actually consumed or enjoyed.
The goal was the engagement, the views, the feeling of being part of the moment online. The physical object's utility was secondary almost irrelevant.
Exactly. And similarly, with Labubu, the source is just as adamant. Labubu, not a toy. She's a badge.
Right, a badge signaling that you're ironic, you're in on the joke, you're part of that weird in the right way crowd.
Right. You acquire her not for her function as a doll, but for her function as a symbol within a particular online subculture. Owning her allows you to signal a specific identity.
Which leads directly to that really concise, really powerful conclusion from the source. We're collecting vibes, not objects.
Collecting vibes, not objects. It just encapsulates this shift beautifully, doesn't it?
It really does. Consumption isn't primarily about acquiring physical goods for their inherent utility or their beauty or their lasting value anymore in this context.
It's about acquiring signifiers.
Yeah.
Signifiers of a lifestyle, an aesthetic, an attitude, or an online identity, the vibe.
Like buying something not because you need it or even deeply love it for itself, but because it fits the aesthetic of your desired online persona. That productivity vibe or the cozy vibe or the clean girl aesthetic vibe, whatever it is.
Precisely. The object is merely the vehicle. It's the tool for acquiring that desired feeling or broadcasting that specific identity marker online. And this fundamental shift in where the value lies, it helps explain why trends are so fleeting, right?
Yeah.
And why actually acquiring the object can feel so anticlimactic sometimes. The value was never really in the object itself. It was in its temporary role as a tool for social signaling and content creation within this dynamic online space.
Yeah.
Once the trend moves on, the vibe changes.
And the object loses its representational power. It's just stuff.
Just stuff.
Okay, this is incredibly insightful. It really clarifies a lot, but it also feels a bit bleak, maybe. If we're just, puppets of the algorithm chasing vibes that ultimately leave us feeling empty, is there anything we can actually do about it?
Well, thankfully, the source doesn't just diagnose the problem and leave us there.
Good.
It does offer some practical steps, some concrete, actionable strategies to help you regain some control, to break the loop and stop wasting money on trends that leave you feeling nothing.
Okay, I'm ready. What's the first one?
The first one is called the 3-day rule.
The 3-day rule. Sounds simple.
It is really simple, but potentially very powerful. When you feel that intense impulse, that urge to buy something viral, that feeling like you must have it right now because you saw it on your feed,
Yeah.
the rule is straightforward. Just wait 3 days.
Wait 3 days. Just pause. Don't click buy now.
Exactly. Give yourself that buffer time. It allows the initial rush, that dopamine spike from the anticipation, the pressure from the social proof, the anxiety of potential scarcity, the FOMO. It gives it time to subside.
Let the dust settle.
Let the dust settle. The source suggests this period lets you see if the desire is just a fleeting impulse triggered by the platform, or if it actually holds up over time. The test is simple. If you still think about it on day 3, it might be for you. If not, TikTok did its thing and moved on.
And hopefully your intense craving for that specific thing will have moved on too.
That's the idea. It sounds like it allows your more rational brain, right, your prefrontal cortex, to kind of catch up to those more reactive, emotional, conditioned responses triggered by the feed.
It introduces a deliberate point of friction into that super smooth impulse-to-purchase pathway that these platforms make so easy.
It pulls you out of the high-pressure, fast-paced environment of the scroll for a moment and gives you actual space to consider if the item genuinely aligns with your real needs, your values, your lasting desires, independent of the immediate online buzz.
That seems like a really manageable first step for anyone feeling this pull.
Okay, what's the second strategy?
The second one the source recommends is creating an anti-haul list.
An anti-haul, like the opposite of those videos where people show off piles of stuff they just bought.
Exactly that. It's about consciously documenting the things you almost bought because you saw them everywhere on TikTok or Instagram or wherever. But then you decided not to. You resisted.
Okay.
But here's the crucial part. The source adds a second step. Write how you feel after skipping them. Ah, why is writing down the feeling so important?
Because the source says this is key to empower yourself. By actively noting the outcome of not buying, maybe the money saved, the clutter avoided, maybe just the relief that the intense craving passed, the realization that you don't actually miss the thing at all.
Yeah.
You are consciously reinforcing the positive feelings associated with resisting that impulse. You're turning the act of avoiding a purchase into a visible, recorded achievement. You reframe it from feeling like deprivation to feeling like empowerment.
So you're essentially building up positive reinforcement for resisting the trend cycle, like training yourself in the opposite direction.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. You're retraining your brain to associate not giving into the impulse with a positive result, which helps counteract that negative feeling of missing out that the platform often deliberately generates.
I like that. Okay, so 3-day rule, anti-haul list.
Yeah.
What's the third strategy?
The third one is what the source calls the vibe audit.
The vibe audit. Okay, this sounds like it gets right to the heart of that collecting vibes, not objects insight.
It really does. The source suggests asking yourself two key questions when you feel drawn to something you saw online. First, do I want this for me or for the aesthetic of me online?
Oof. Okay.
And second, maybe even more pointedly, would I want it if no one ever saw it?
Wow. Those are pretty revealing questions to ask yourself.
They really are. They force you to unpack your motivation. Are you genuinely drawn to the object itself, its function, its beauty, how it makes you feel or improves your life in private?
Yeah.
Or are you actually drawn more to what owning it represents in an online context? Is the desire really about how it will look in your curated feed, what it will signal to your followers, or how it fits into a specific internet-defined vibe?
It really makes you confront that performance aspect of online consumption head on.
Precisely. The vibe audit is basically a tool for self-awareness, for trying to distinguish between authentic personal desire and the desire to acquire a symbol for public display or for a performance of identity. It just asks you to be honest with yourself about how much of your purchasing decisions are influenced by the potential online reception versus your own private needs and wants.
Applying these steps, the 3-day rule, the anti-haul, the vibe audit, it doesn't sound like it means becoming completely disconnected or, like the source said, being boring.
Not at all. The source really emphasizes that the goal isn't like total abstinence from trends or anything like that. It's about conscious choice.
Moving from being automatically driven by the feed and social pressure.
To being deliberate about your decisions. It's about being not a puppet, as the source puts it.
And I appreciate that the source is very human about it, too. It says, we're all going to fall for a trend sometimes. That's fine. You're human.
Which is such a great reminder, isn't it? The aim isn't perfection. It's just about gaining more agency, even a little bit. The real power comes from making even a small shift.
From consuming to questioning, from impulse to insight.
That's the core shift.
That shift in perspective feels like the real victory here, doesn't it? Moving from just reacting to actively understanding why you feel a certain pull, and then consciously deciding how you want to respond.
And in making that shift, as the source concludes, you start to get our power back. Power over your attention, power over your wallet, and power over your own definition of what constitutes value and desirability in your life.
Instead of letting algorithms and fleeting online trends dictate it for you.
Exactly.
So the next time you're scrolling and you feel that intense, sudden urge for that specific item, everyone's talking about that pastel cup, that haunted doll, that $6 cookie that's probably, let's be honest, just mid.
The source encourages you to just pause.
Just take a breath.
And recognize what that pause actually represents.
Yeah.
It's not about deprivation. It's not about being left out of the trend.
You're not missing out. You're waking up.
A really powerful way to frame awareness itself as the gain. Waking up to the psychological mechanisms at play allows you to step outside the automatic response and make a more intentional choice, even if sometimes you still choose the cookie.
Right. But it's a choice. This deep dive, it really did help unpack some of the chaos behind these viral cravings for me. Understanding how the dopamine system is conditioned by the scroll, how these ancient mimicry instincts translate to online trends, how novelty grabs us in all the noise, and how marketing tactics are amplified. It really does all circle back to the central idea.
That we're often chasing a feeling, right? A connection, a vibe, much more than the physical object itself.
And internalizing that the experience is often completed the moment the content is created, or the trend is participated in online. That helps explain why the objects themselves can feel so hollow or unsatisfying after the initial buzz just fades away.
It wasn't really about the taste of the cookie. It was about being able to post about trying it.
It wasn't really about having a doll. It was about signaling a specific online identity, wearing that badge.
It's clarity and chaos, hopefully.
It is, and it leaves me thinking, if this dynamic, this pattern of collecting vibes and prioritizing the anticipation and the online performance over the actual substance of the object, if it's so powerful in our consumer habits driven by these platforms, where else might this pattern be showing up in our lives?
Ooh, that's the really provocative question, isn't it? The one the source implicitly raises. Beyond just buying things, where else are we potentially prioritizing the content or the badge over the genuine experience or the underlying substance?
Like, are we curating the appearance of health or productivity online, maybe more than focusing on the actual practices day to day?
Or are we building vast networks of online connections for show, maybe instead of nurturing fewer, deeper, more meaningful relationships offline?
Are we chasing the look of happiness on our feeds instead of actually cultivating genuine well-being in our actual, non-digital lives?
Heavy questions, but incredibly relevant ones, I think. It feels like understanding this specific phenomenon of TikTok cravings is maybe just the tip of the iceberg.
For understanding our broader relationship with the digital world and how it's subtly, or maybe not so subtly, shaping our desires and behaviors across the board.
Absolutely. So maybe the takeaway is, the next time you're scrolling, pay attention. Not just to what the feed is showing you, but to how it's making you feel. What impulses is it stirring up? What do you suddenly find yourself craving?
And maybe, just maybe, try pausing, just for a beat.
No.
See what you discover about what you truly want versus what the scroll wants you to want.
See if you're missing out or if you're waking up.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.